Hey kinfolk, welcome to the Bearded Axe. In today's episode I am working on making a new bench. And I think this is applicable to all of us as we need a workspace for all of our crafting and all of our repairing and all the things that we need to do. This can be applied for making and building chairs and seat chests, but it can also be used for making a dress and all sorts of really big projects. So you can also scale this down to a very small application. So if you have a room and you want something 10 by 10, you can definitely use this guideline for your needs. And a lot of the materials I got are just scrap materials. Like that door was going to be thrown out from a construction project that I was involved with. And these boards were from a tent frame experiment that didn't work because it ended up busting off some of the tenons that put together. So I'm just reusing them, repurposing them for this workbench. Now I'm trying to keep as much length on these as possible. The reason being is I want a nice wide base. It's not going to be quite as long as the door, but this is what it is. And so I'm also going to Craig screw these or pocket hole screw these onto the bottom of that door or the bottom of that top. The reason being is I don't want screws going through the top down to the boards below, because I'm going to be sliding all sorts of stuff around on that, like MC foam or really soft woods like cedar or white pine, and I don't want to scratch it up with a screw head. So I'm measuring every 12 inches on here, but you can do it anywhere from 6 to 12 inches. You can put a pocket hole screw, and that should suffice for your needs. You could use screws from the top to go down to the bottom to get to the board, but you have to countersink them or sink them down deep enough to where it's not going to stick up and scratch up your material. You could also just put down a bit of cardboard, and that'll help protect your project as well. And oh boy, this thing is heavy, by the way. It's solid cherry, and I think it felt like it weighed 150 pounds. And it's really awkward, so it's hard to get underneath it and lift it up. So I had nobody around me to help me pick it up, so, well, you gotta do it yourself. And these Sawhorses are not the best. They're cheap, they're from Harbor Freight, but it's what I had, and it worked it worked good enough. It worked. So yeah, there's a saying in where I'm at is, it is what it is. And that's exactly what you can say about these Sawhorses. If I spent a little bit more, I could have got some better ones at, say, Lowe's or Home Depot. So here we are with our trusty rusty slide ruler, also known as a combination square. And I'm getting a good, I think 4 inches from the side. And that's where those boards are going to sit. And line it up, making sure it's nice and square. I'm also making sure that that board is dead center and it's nice and balanced, so there's no extra lip on one side or the other. Making sure that it's exact on both sides of that tabletop. Now, considering that my clamps aren't long enough to reach that board, I have to use a bridge or a stretcher between both sides, and I can clamp it on the wood then, and I can keep them both clamped at the same time, and that'll allow me to screw down the piece on both sides, and I can go from one side to the other to make sure that it's nice and parallel. So whenever you clamp something down, it'll shift a little bit, so you want to give it a good tap-a-roo. Also, make sure your clamps are nice and tight. When you screw these things down, they'll walk around a little bit. That little screw will do that. It'll shift it maybe a 32nd or a 16th of an inch, but it'll definitely get you off square. Now for the other side. Now, watching this and editing this whole thing, you pick up certain mistakes, and it's okay to go back and say, you know what, I could have done that better. And that's actually a very good thing. So I should have put that stretcher in between those two sideboards to make sure that I got a nice 90 degrees on that board, so it's not leaning one way or another. As you'll see later on, that it will be kind of leaning, and I have to adjust it. And I also forgot to glue a lot of the pieces. So half of this stuff is glued, the half isn't. And so it's a good reminder, you know what, you pick up some bad habits, you want to keep moving, but you need to stop and make sure you're doing everything correctly. And again, using that stretcher board so I can apply even pressure across the whole board. And this will definitely help speed things up, as normally you would have to put the clamp on each part that you're screwing in. So you'd have to put the clamp right over that little pocket hole and then screw it down, then move the clamp and screw it down. But this helps keep that from happening. You can just go from one pocket hole screw to the other. I like to countersink a lot of my screws. It helps keep that screw from staying up on the surface and getting in your way. This also helps the wood from splitting on you, and then you have to replace it. So sometimes you have to really crank down on that screw. And here we are. This is that part where that board was not square, and so I had to push it out a little bit further and then re-screw it. And I couldn't go through the same screw hole because it would go right back to where it was before. So I had to go up at an angle to create a new screw hole. So far so good. Looks like it worked. Looks good. Looks good. So I want the total height of this to be 37 3/8. Sorry, 37 3/8. Let me double check that. Double check your measurements. Measure twice, cut once. So 35 and 9/8. And 9/16. 35 and 9/16. Also, I wanted it to be a tall bench because, well, I'm a pretty tall dude, and it's at the exact height of my table saw, and I can use the workbench as a lead-out table. So all the reps that I make will end up on my table. I can also use it to stabilize a really long rep. So if I have a 16-foot piece that I need to rip out, I can do that on this table saw, or this workbench. Considering this is a 9-foot bench, I wanted to make sure that I had not only all 4 corners supported, but I wanted to have some middle supports too. So I had to cut out 10 of these things. You're going to see why I need 10 of that length. So I'm putting this other piece right behind that other 2x4 in an L or V-shaped pattern, however you want to look at it. This will kind of help it from swaying in either direction, forward, side to side, you name it. And this is a really solid construction technique, and it's better than using just a solid 4x4. And I'm using that clamp to close in that gap, and of course I'm giving a good tap-a-roo to put it in its proper place. And I'm clamping it down there to make sure that it's nice and level, nothing's shifting, keeping it all together. Also keep in mind that wood is rarely straight or it doesn't crown or flat, so you have to either push it into place or you have to cut it into a straight form with a joiner or a planer of some kind. And I have neither one of those things, but I have clamps and I have a hammer, and that's good enough. Also, make sure that all of your cuts are nice and square, and that's a combination. No, I'm sorry, that's a speed square, and it's really quick. I also want to make sure that the bottom of this, I can get a push broom underneath it, and I have to make sure that it's tall enough for that to for that push broom to just go underneath it, so I could actually get all the dust and whatnot. Because, well, I don't want to bring a girl over and she looks underneath my bench and sees how dirty it is. So that'd be embarrassing. Again, measure twice, cut once, or, drill and screw once. You get my meaning. So this bottom bracing keeps the whole thing from swaying and shifting and moving around. Because as strong as those legs are, you put enough weight behind it and enough force on that weight, and it's going to move and shift in ways that you don't want it to. This will also prove to be extremely valuable in the next episode, as there will be a follow-up to this basic build. I'm going to add all sorts of cool stuff, so be sure to check that out. Things that you're going to want to put on your bench. By the way, I had to recut this because I didn't account for that 3.5-inch board that was in its place. So I had to just cut off 3.5 inches from that total length, and it fit just right. Line it up with here. That is a really nice looking shirt, and I gotta say, I look really hot. You can get one too at my Etsy store. Check it out in the description below. So this is where that center leg comes from. That keeps the table from kind of turning into a boomerang or just kind of dipping in the middle. And I want to make sure that it has all the support it needs to make sure I can support just about anything if I wanted to. I can put an engine on there and it would support it. So real quick reminder, keep those hairs safe. I don't want anything to happen to you guys, and so you want to keep all that stuff out of the way of powder tools, because it will get tangled up and you will say some words and those words won't be nice words. So tuck it up, keep safe. By the way, that is a nice looking hoodie. I wonder where he got it. Oh right, at my Etsy store. Check it out in the description down below and help support the channel. Thanks. So like I said below, wood is rarely straight and flat, and you have to twist it sometimes to get it into place. And so I'm using this clamp as a lever to push it into the place that I need it to be. You can close in the bottom on just 3 sides and leave one long side open, and that would be great for, say, a sitting bench and you get your legs underneath it. But this is a standing bench, and you know what, I'm going to put on some serious weight to this bench, and I want it to be as secure as possible. Again, don't forget to glue. I just, like I said, half of this thing is glued up and the other half isn't. But I've been using this for roughly 9 months and it's held up beautifully. You know, even though my legs are all exactly the same height, guess what? That concrete slab is not level. It's not straight, it's not flat, it's nothing. So I've got to put some shims underneath it to bring it up to the same height that I need it to be. And unfortunately, I had to trim them down, and that'll be in a later episode where I had to trim it all down to be exactly the same height as my table saw. Otherwise, I'm going to be hitting the side of that table every single time. And I used some 1/8 inch plywood shims, and I'm just adding just the tiniest amount with this cardboard to kind of bring it up to the height that I need it to be so that it doesn't wobble on me. You know, if you have a smaller, shorter table, this won't likely be a problem. Or if you have this on carpet, it's definitely not going to be a problem. As long as your legs are the same height, it should be good. But the longer it is, the taller it is, the more likely this is going to be an issue. So it is 35 3/4. So I'm making these measurements because I need to put some HDF or high density fiberboard or hardened tempered paneling on it. You can see it's right there, it's that brown stuff. And that's going to go on top of the table. The reason why I like using this stuff is, well, because it's cheap. It's $8 and it's nice and smooth and hard. So I can abuse it and put glue on it, and when I'm just want it to be replaced, I just take it up and put another $8 piece down. Now I forgot to show you the footage of me ripping out that first piece, but it was like 35 3/8, and cutting off that last bit. See, I should have thought that through, so now I gotta figure it out here. Danger, Will Robinson. Thankfully this stuff is real thin, and if it was to kick back, generally you don't want to back cut like that because that's a recipe for it to kick back on you. And I just need a piece long enough to fill in that little section right there. So I got to cut it by hand, of course. Like a glove. Now, I would highly encourage you not to glue this in place because after all, you need to pull it back up. And gluing it would just be such a pain in the butt. So what I'm doing is I'm using a staple gun and I'm just putting it down, and I'm using the hammer to sink it in a little bit further to make sure it's below the surface and it's not sticking up and scratching up whatever I'm sliding around on it. And that whole panel is not going to move. And that's it. That's my table. Finally, a good table for my height. I'm not hurting my back, bent over on it. I can do a lot of good stuff. I can use it as a lead out table for my table saw. So pretty happy with it.